Hello, second grade Smarties, and welcome to Wit and Wisdom, Module 3, Civil Rights Heroes, Lesson 17. Today, our content question, or I like to think of it like a pizza bite question, is what is the essential meaning of Ruby Bridges Goes to School, My True Story? So, in our last lesson, we listened to the song This Little Light of Mine. And what we are going to do today is we are going to sing it together. Now, as you are singing this song with me, I want you to start thinking, why did the creator of this song use repeated words? Why did the creator, the writer of this song, use repeated words? All right, are you ready? Here we go. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine every day, every day, every day, every day. I'm gonna let my little light shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Every day, every day, every day, every day. I'm gonna let my little light shine. Deep down in the south, we're gonna let it shine. Deep down in the south, we're gonna let it shine. Deep down in the south, we're gonna let it shine every day, every day, every day, every day. I'm gonna let my little light shine. All right, so good job. Pat yourself on the back for singing This Little Light of Mine. So, why did the writer of this song repeat the same line at the end of every verse? So, at the end of every verse, we heard the words, I'm going to let my little light shine for every verse. Why do you think the writer repeated those words? Tell me in the puzzle. So, writers of songs, writers of texts, writers of any kind of print, they repeat words to help the reader, the listener, the speaker get it stuck in their head, right? If you are repeating something, that means you want your listener to know that those words are important. Think back to the song that we listened to with Martin Luther King Jr. Ain't gonna let nobody bring me down. Remember, we heard those words repeated because it was important for the listener to know that don't let people bring you down. If you have something important to do, if you have something important to say, don't let people knock you down. Keep going. Don't give up. So, this song, This Little Light of Mine, what do you think is the meaning of this song? What do you think is the lesson that you can keep in your heart and your mind about the song? Tell me in the puzzle. So something that I can learn from this song is to let my light shine. So what is my light? It's not a literal light, right? It's not a light that's keeping things bright so I can see. It's the light inside me. It's that joy, it's that happiness, it's that bravery and courage. I need to let my bravery, my growth mindset, my joyfulness shine so other people can see it, right? I can't keep it to myself. I need to be joyful and brave so other people can see it and to keep going. So, we have been rereading Ruby Bridges Goes to School, My True Story. So, just like we reread the Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington and I Have a Dream, we reread that text or chunks of those texts. So, tell me again, Smarties, how can rereading a text help you understand the lesson? How can rereading a text help you understand the lesson to learn? Tell me in the puzzle. So when we reread a text, we can learn new things every time. So the first time we read this text, we talked about what we could see and some questions that we had. The second time we read the text, we talked about our scape chart. We talked about our setting, our characters, the action of our characters, the problem and the ending. We looked at the narrative. We looked at the whole book to talk about those story elements. In our last lesson, we talked about the first person point of view, how Ruby Bridges was the one telling her story. So every time we reread a text or chunks of a text, we learn a little bit more about the topic, about the lesson. Rereading helps build our knowledge on the meaning of that text. So, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be looking at the last few pages of this text. Now, remember, this is a first person point of view. That means Ruby Bridges is the one writing the story and the one narrating or telling her story. This is all about her. So, as I am reading this section of the text, I want you to think about how this is different from the beginning section of the text. So, this is the ending of her story. Think about how it was different from the beginning from when she was a little girl. All right. Now I am grown up. I am married. I have children. One day, Mrs. Henry and I were both asked to be on a TV show. That was the first time we had seen each other in many years. Now we talk to each other often. Now, Black and white children can go to the same schools. I like to visit schools. I tell my story to children. I tell children that Black people and white people can be friends. And most important, I tell children to be kind to each other. All right. So, this section of the text, what point of view is this section of the text? What point of view are we seeing in this text? Tell me in the puzzle. We're seeing first person point of view, right? We are seeing Ruby tell her story, tell what she is like when she has grown up, what she has done since she has grown up. What is a word that tells you when this section of the text is happening? Let me go back. Whoops. Let me go back. Now, Black children and white children can go to the same schools. I like to visit schools. I tell my story to children. What is a time word that tells you when this section of the text is happening? Is this happening in the past, in the present, or in the future? It's happening in the present. It's happening right blank. What word on this page of the text tells you that this is happening in present time? Tell me in the puzzle. So the word now tells us that this is happening right now. As Ruby Bridges is writing this book, she's telling about what she is doing right now. She tells her story from the past, but she is also telling her story in the present. So, how does a written text in first person point of view tell us about a person's thoughts, feelings, and actions? Let me read that question again. How does a text written from first point of view tell us about a person's thoughts, feelings, and actions? How does this book, from Ruby's perspective, tell us about how she was thinking and feeling? Tell us in a puzzle. So, first person narratives, right? First person text, we get to hear from the person's words, from their own words, how they were feeling, what they were thinking and what they were doing. Sometimes when we read texts about a person like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in the first text that we read, that was not first person. We heard information about Dr. King and we heard about what he experienced, but we didn't hear from his own words what he was thinking and feeling. We could see what he was doing, we could see his actions, but it is inside of us, it is in our hearts, in our minds, that we have those thoughts and feelings. So Ruby Bridges telling her story from her point of view, it gives us a deeper understanding of what she was feeling. What was she feeling in her heart? What was she thinking in her mind? So let's look at a few pages of the text to think about what Ruby was thinking and feeling when she was a girl. My name is Ruby Bridges. In 1960, I went to kindergarten in a school for Black children. I liked my school. I liked my teacher. I liked my friends. So in kindergarten, how did Ruby Bridges feel? How did she feel and think about kindergarten? Tell me in the puzzle. The text tells us that she liked her school, that she liked her teacher, and that she liked her friends. In her heart, in her mind, she knew that she was safe there, right? She liked where she was. She liked who she learned with and who she learned from. I loved Mrs. Henry, and Mrs. Henry loved me. I was a very good student. I learned math. I learned how to read, but I wish the children would come back. How did Ruby feel about Mrs. Henry? What does the text say that she feels about Mrs. Henry? The text tells us that she loves Mrs. Henry. But what was she thinking and feeling at the end of this page? What was she feeling at the end of this page? Tell me in the puzzle. It said that she wished that children would come back. Remember, at this point, Ruby Bridges was the first Black student to go to a whites-only school. She was the first person to bring integration into schools. And so a lot of white families, they pulled their kids out of school because they didn't want them learning with someone that looked different. So imagine how she was feeling about that. She wished they would come back. So what kind of feelings was she experiencing? She was experiencing sadness, right? But did she quit going to school? No, she didn't. Months and months passed. Then one day, children began to come back to school. At last, I had friends to play with. I was very, very happy. So once children did start coming back to school, how did Ruby feel? Tell me in the puzzle. It tells us that she was very, very happy. She was happy because she not only had friends to play with, but think about it. She went through a lot of challenges, Smarties. She overcame a lot of injustices. Remember, injustices are those things that are not fair or not equal. All right, and let's think about what she was thinking and feeling to now. What is she thinking and feeling now as a grown up? Now, Black children and white children can go to the same schools. I like to visit schools. I tell my story to children. I tell children that Black people and white people can be friends. So, what is Ruby thinking and feeling now as an adult? What her experiences have led her to do some amazing things. How does she think or feel about those experiences? Tell me in the puzzle. So it says that she likes to tell her story and that she loves to tell children that they can be together, that people of different colors can be friends, and that they can be kind. So I want you to think, how did Ruby respond to injustice as a little girl? What did she do when she was a little girl? The injustice that she faced was that She was she was being yelled at. There were people holding signs. There were people telling her that she did not deserve to go to a whites only school. How did she respond to those injustices? What did she do, Smarties? Tell me in the puzzle. She kept going to school. She responded by still going. Even though she was alone with Mrs. Henry, even though people were yelling at her, she never gave up. She kept going to school. She kept learning. She loved learning and she loved her teacher. How does Ruby Bridges respond to injustice now? What does she do to respond to injustice? Tell me in the puzzle. She goes to schools and she tells children about her experiences. She tells her story. She tells children that Black and white people can be friends, and she tells them to be kind. What did Ruby learn from her experiences as a little girl? What did she learn as a little girl that she kept in her heart and her mind? Look at this last page. I tell children that Black people and white people can be friends. What did she learn from her experiences? What have you learned from Ruby's experiences as a little girl? Tell me in the puzzle. So we learn to be kind. We learn to be friends with people that don't look like us, right? We learn that people can be together despite the color of their skin, and that it is wrong to keep segregation, right? We learned that it was wrong to keep people apart based on the color of their skin. So we could say that Ruby was brave and was the first Black student at an all white school. And Ruby goes to school to tell kids her stories, and that Ruby tells kids to be nice to each other. That is how she responded. Let's think about how her response impacted America. So, what does impact mean? If I impact you, that means that I am changing or making you think or feel about something in a different way. So, an impact on my life would be the day that I found out that I got to be the educator of the week here in Tennessee, in Knoxville. That impacted me. That changed me. That encouraged me to keep going, to keep trying to be a great second grade teacher and to keep a growth mindset. That impacted me. That changed my thoughts and my feelings. So, how did Ruby's actions change America? How did she impact children and people in America and around the world? How did she impact people, Smarties? Tell me in the puzzle. So, her experiences with being brave, it led to Black children and white children going to school together. And it also taught people to be kind, to be nicer to each other. That's something that can stick in our hearts and our minds. Be kind and fight against injustices. Be brave. Keep a growth mindset. Never give up. All right, Smarties. So, in our next lesson, you are going to be writing a first person point of view narrative. So, you are going to be given a question. How did Ruby respond to the injustice on her first day of school? So, remember, when we are completing this writing task, we are writing from Ruby's point of view. So, we are going to be using sentences like, I am walking to my new school. It is the first day. It is the white school. They do not want me to go to the school. They are yelling at me. I keep walking with my mom. What words in those sentences tell you that this is first person point of view? What are some words that tell you that it is Ruby that is talking? Tell me in the puzzle. So remember, first person point of view, we are going to use words like I, me, my. We're talking about words that belong to myself. words that belong to me. I could use words like us, we, my, me, I. So, as you are writing tomorrow, Smarties, you are going to be responding like you are Ruby Bridges. So, you are going to be using those first person pronouns. You're going to be using those first person point of view. All right, Smarties, and let's wrap up this lesson with a deep dive. So, as we are preparing our minds for our writing task tomorrow, we want to make sure that we keep our reader and our listener engaged. We want to make sure that we make our writing interesting and that it isn't boring. Because sometimes if we repeat words that are not necessarily going to teach us a lesson, it kind of gets boring. So I'm going to read you 2 paragraphs. Now, these paragraphs are about the same topic, but one paragraph is more interesting to listen to than the other. Okay, think about what you are hearing in these paragraphs. What makes them interesting or not interesting? Okay, here we go. Ruby experienced that kind of school every day for weeks that turned into months. She walked to the France school surrounded by marshals. Ruby walked slowly for the first few blocks. She was wearing a clean dress and a bow in her hair and carrying her lunch pail. Ruby saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street as she approached the school. So that was paragraph number 1. Every day, for weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of school day. She walked to the France school surrounded by marshals, wearing a clean dress and a bow in her hair and carrying her lunch pail. Ruby walked slowly for the first few blocks. As Ruby approached the school, she saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street. I want you to think, which of those paragraphs sounded more interesting to you? Which paragraph sounded more interesting to you, and why did it sound more interesting? Tell me in the puzzle. So to me, the second paragraph sounded more interesting because it mixed up some of the words and it painted a picture of what it looked like before introducing the subject. In the first paragraph, I heard the word Ruby over and over again. Every sentence started with she or Ruby. In the second paragraph, it started with different words. Every day. For weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of day. So it sets your brain up about what the surroundings looked like. And then it told about how Ruby experienced it. In every sentence, it started with a different word. Whereas in the first paragraph, it started with she, Ruby, Ruby. So when you are writing, Smarties, think about how you can change up your sentences to make it more interesting for your reader. All right, Smarties, that is going to be it for today. Remember to keep that growth mindset. Good learners do challenging things, and good learners fight against injustices. Think about how you can be brave like Ruby Bridges. All right, Smarties, I will see you tomorrow with our writing lesson. Happy learning.